Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Adam, I'm an ancient Greek reenactor and history enthusiast, and recently I've seen a lot of comments regarding Spartans being homosexuals, and a lot of comments regarding Spartan boy loving. Now, is this really accurate? Were homosexual behaviours really common in ancient Sparta? And was it customary for an older man to have sexual relations with younger boys? Join me today as we traverse this topic, presenting facts not to push a certain agenda, but to seek the truth. In terms of realistic anthropology, homosexual people certainly existed in Sparta, as they have in every civilization. The question is really how societally acceptable were these behaviours? This way of thinking can really be traced back to two reasons. One, homosexuality was decently common throughout the ancient Greek world, and two, Plutarch stated that it was common and normalised for adult men of Sparta to have relations with younger boys. Taking these two things into account, it may seem as though the answer is definitely yes. But it's really not that simple. Let's start by addressing the first, more open-ended point, that being that homosexuality was decently common throughout the ancient Greek world. We do certainly see this. The sacred band of Thebes is an excellent example. It was said that the band was an institution of male couples. This was believed to make the unit stronger, as a man would be less likely to desert and act cowardly in front of his lover. It was also not uncommon and completely normal for mentors to expect sexual favours from teenage students. But Sparta was very different to the rest of the Greeks. This is something I believe many people are not too aware of, that being that Sparta was so vastly different to the rest of the Greek world that they were commonly portrayed as outsiders. This can be attributed to a multitude of reasons, but perhaps that will be a topic for another video. Sparta became very well known for being very secluded and shut off to the rest of the Greeks, hence why we have so few in-depth descriptions of the way Sparta worked, apart from Xenophon, who we'll cover later. Really, we can classify two main behaviours, those between two adults, and those between an adult and a child, or modern-day pedophilia. And this brings us nicely onto the next point, Plutarch. As mentioned earlier, it was decently common for adult-child encounters to happen in ancient Greece, and this is precisely what Plutarch says was common and promoted in Sparta. Written in Life of Lycurgus, Plutarch tells us this: "When the boys reached this age, they were favoured with the society of lovers from among the reputable young men. The elderly men also kept close watch on them, coming more frequently to their places of exercise and observing their contests of strength and wit, not cursorily, but with the idea that they were all in a sense the fathers and tutors and governors of all the boys." Later he also writes, "The boys' lovers also shared with them in their honour or disgrace, and it is said that one of them was once fined by the magistrates because his favourite boy had let an ungenerous cry escape him while he was fighting. Moreover, though this sort of love was so approved among them that even the maidens found lovers in good and noble women, still there was no jealous rivalry in it, but those who fixed their attentions on the same boy made this rather a foundation of friendship with one another, and persevered in common efforts to make their loved ones as noble as possible." If you read this text in its translated format and in its most pro-homosexual way, Plutarch is essentially saying that when boys hit puberty, they became sexually available for older men. The men who selected them were responsible for caring for and training them, and multiple men could select the same boy, and it was said to strengthen the bond between them. And women did the same with girls. If read in that way, Plutarch is saying that in the Agoge, Sparta had basically regulated gay pedophilia. Now, the issues with Plutarch is that he's living some 400 years after classical Sparta, being alive in the 1st century AD, and he is commonly regarded by many experts to be writing about Roman age Sparta, which was completely different to that of classical Sparta. Moreover, when you compare his writings to contemporary sources such as Xenophon and Aristotle, they state polar opposites. In the Constitution of the Spartans, Xenophon states, "I think I ought to say something also about intimacy with boys, since this matter has also a bearing on education. In other Greek states, for instance, among the Boeotians, man and boy live together like married people. Elsewhere, among the Eleans, for example, consent is won by means of favours. Some, on the other hand, entirely forbid young men to talk with boys." The customs instituted by Lycurgus were opposed to all of these. If someone, being himself an honest man, admired a boy's soul and tried to make of him an ideal friend without reproach and to associate with him, he approved and believed in the excellence of this kind of training. But if it was clear that the attraction lay in the boy's outward beauty, he banned the connection as an abomination, and thus he caused lovers to abstain from boys no less than parents abstain from sexual intercourse with their children, and brothers and sisters with each other. I am not surprised, however, that people refuse to believe this, for in many states the laws are not opposed to the indulgence of these appetites. Essentially, Xenophon tells us that Lycurgus' views on relationships where if their intent was not a sexual one, it was approved and seen as an excellent relationship. But if it was for physical purposes, it was an abomination and forbidden by Spartan law. This is quite literally the opposite to what Plutarch says. Now, Xenophon is where we actually get lots of our information about classical Sparta from, as he himself moved there and even put his own children through the agoge. Xenophon was actually an Athenian who liked the civic structure of Sparta so much that he moved there, even becoming very close friends with King Agesilaus II. Xenophon always speaks very highly of Sparta, which has led some to question his reliability, but to me and many others, the fact that he was raised an Athenian and deemed Sparta's civic structure to be better points to the fact that Sparta was noticeably different. He actively chose to put his own children through the agoge and mentions nothing about boy-man relationships, except for the fact that it was forbidden. Aristotle is another who mentions this, and also tells us something else which may bring into question the practice of homosexuality in Sparta. And this has taken place in Sparta, for the lawgiver, wishing the whole city to be of strong character, displays his intention clearly in relation to the men, but in the case of the women, has entirely neglected the matter, for they live dissolutely in respect of every sort of dissoluteness, and luxuriously. So the inevitable result is that in a state thus constituted, wealth is held in honour, especially if it is the case that the people are under the sway of their women, as most of the military and warlike races are, except the Celts and such other races as have openly held in honour compassionate friendship between males. For it appears that the original teller of the legend had good reason for uniting Ares with Aphrodite, for all men of martial spirit appear to be attracted to the companionship either of male associates or of women. Hence this characteristic existed amongst the Spartans, and in the time of their empire, many things were controlled by the women. Yet what difference does it make whether the women rule or the rulers are ruled by the women? The result is the same. Essentially what he's saying is that the women of Sparta had a lot of control, even though they were not the head of state. This would not really make sense if homosexuality was so spread through Sparta, as why would so many gay men be so heavily influenced by their wives? Both Xenophon and Aristotle point to these relationships being forbidden, whereas the later writer, Plutarch, says it was common. Were there homosexuals in Sparta? Yes, just like every civilization throughout history. However, it seems it was the exception to the rule, not the rule itself, as Plutarch would have us believe. Xenophon and Aristotle are just more credible in this situation because they were actively alive during the time period, and Xenophon lived in Sparta and put his children through the agoge. Plutarch is writing hundreds of years later, and we're not even sure whether he's talking about classical Sparta or Roman Age Sparta. I hope that you enjoyed this video and learnt something about it. If you disagree with me, please leave a comment down below and I will happily have a civil discussion with you. I do generally try and respond to as many comments as I can. If you'd like to support the channel, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could subscribe, and if you want to go the extra mile, then I do actually have a merch store where I sell a variety of historical based items. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.